Embrace your learning and teaching. It's publish or perish. Let's get published with Professor Shelley Kinash. Welcome to episode 2. In episode 1, Shelley explained what this podcast does and doesn't address and covered parts of an empirical journal paper. In this episode 2, Shelley is going to delve into the do's and don'ts in writing an educational journal paper and also give us some practical how-to advice. Shelley, let's start with those 10 do's and don'ts.
Thanks, Jason. I wanted to say first that I'm not going to present these do's and don'ts in any particular order. They're all equally important. What I've done is over the years, I've surveyed informally editors and peer reviewers and also taken my own experience as a submitting author, as an assistant editor, and as a frequent peer reviewer, and I've gathered the common laments, the reasons why they tend to turn papers back, why they don't get published. So the don'ts are how not to get your paper published, and the do's are what to do to make sure that that paper that you've poured your heart and soul into gets accepted by that journal. So the first do is choose your journal wisely. Don't leave your journal choice to chance. Don't go with the one that happens to spruik you or send you an email saying, hey, we need authors for this issue or this journal. Go through and make reasoned, conscious decisions about which journal you're going to publish into. So sometimes it's because you really want to reach a particular type of audience, or sometimes it's because a particular journal has been running a particular series in that, and you feel that you want to contribute to that body of literature and really have your say in that sphere. Your university will tend to want you to publish in Q1 journals. So this is called different things in different countries and different contexts. But this means that these are the top quartile journals in terms of their impact, how many times those journal papers tend to get cited. And they also look at things like reject rates. So the journals who are Q1 will reject more papers because the more papers that they reject, the higher up in status that they go. So there's lots of things to take into mind when you're considering your journal. Number 2 is ask critical friends to peer review your paper before submission. So the don't is to don't submit your paper before it is ready for publication. So you want to use knowledgeable others and not too nice, the people who will give you true feedback about what you need to fix and change and edit and reconsider before you send it in for possible publication. Because once you've sent it in to that editor, you're out of luck. If your paper is half-baked, they're going to vote you out. You're going to be evicted, and you won't have a second go. So have that first go with critical friends who will give you the truth, and then go for it. Number 3 is do persist with your publication. Don't give up on the article if given major revisions. Most journal papers come back with major revisions. And sometimes you need a stiff drink or a hug from a not-so-critical friend because sometimes it hurts and sometimes you disagree. But you need to persist with that. And if you're not going to make those changes, you need to give really valid reasons why. So many journal papers come back with major revisions and the authors give up on it. You're close now. If you've been accepted with major revisions, put in those hours, put in those blood, sweat, and tears, call back in your critical friends and do it because you're close to getting published. Number 4, do contextualize your research in what has already been published. Don't assume that you are the only one researching this question. And this is a common error because people get really, really excited about their contribution and what they're doing. And they will point out that they're original or they're the first to. But you know what? You're probably not. You really have to make sure that you've addressed the literature really well. And maybe there isn't something in higher education or the university sector about this, but then look to VET, the vocational sector, because maybe they've dealt with that question, or maybe even in secondary, etc. So look in other contexts and fields to see what has been covered about this, and make sure you cover that in your literature review. Number 5, use plain language and clear expression. Don't overly use academic language and vague theory. Sometimes people think that this makes their journal paper sound more scholarly and more publishable, but it actually does the opposite. If you're able to write in plain language, which you need to be able to do, that shows that you really understand your topic, and it makes it publishable. It makes it compelling. It makes it readable to audiences, and they're more likely to apply your findings.
We're rolling through the do's and don'ts, and Shelley, let me tell you, the one there that jumps out at me really big is don't give up if you're given major revisions. Persist. I love that. What's number 6?
Excellent. Thanks, Jason. Number 6, the do, is to closely follow the journal's guidelines and templates. Don't believe that reviewers will make an exception for you. You need to follow the rules here. The rules are the rules are the rules. So if the journal says 10-point font, you better put it in 10-point font. If they say they want these headings in this order, you need to follow those headings in that order. If you don't like it, then seek out another journal, because you need to follow those guidelines to a T if you're going to attempt to publish in that journal. Number 7, do acknowledge the research limitations and don't exaggerate your methods, your findings, or your implications. This is a surefire way to not get published. And particularly when we're looking at learning and teaching research, we need to acknowledge that there are very seldom dependent and independent variables that you can pull apart and classify in such a binary, clear way. We have evidence that our approach has had an impact or improved student learning, but we can never prove that. So you can show why you think that that's the case, but you need to acknowledge that there is evidence pointing in that direction, but there are contraindications or reasons to question this finding. So don't exaggerate your methods, your findings, or your implications. This doesn't mean that you're not making a contribution and leading this further, but you want to make sure that you don't hyperbolize it. Number 8 is clearly state a central thesis and make sure you stay with that all of the way through. So don't wander, or what my German teacher used to call blunderbluster. He said you have to really watch that you don't take a blunderbluster approach where you're just, like taking a shotgun and spattering it all over the place. You need to make sure that you state a central thesis. So here's another metaphor. It's like having a thread or a string or a chain that you bead onto. If you don't have that string or that chain, your beads are going to fly all over the place. Your reader is not going to be able to follow your paper. So right from your abstract, your introduction, through your methods, your discussion, your conclusion, that central thesis needs to be apparent all of the way through. Number 9, disseminate your published paper through social media. Don't expect readers to find your research through traditional means. So there has been research that, unfortunately, not too many people read your full journal paper after you have written it, but where they do read it, where they do find it, is if you've spruiked it. So social media gives us such a wonderful opportunity because you can tweet that link, you can LinkedIn post that link, you can link it to various websites, and that's how your paper is going to be found, cited, influence the work of further and future researchers, and that's how you're going to have greater impact because people are going to find it and apply your approaches to teaching and to making contributions to student learning, and it's going to make a difference. And finally, number 10 is do, and this is a micro one, but vitally important, do reference journal papers published in your chosen journal. Don't forget this important source. I've seen this so many times. And if you don't, in your references, include papers that are published in your chosen journal, it sends two messages to the editors and the peer reviewers. One, either you're not across the literature. Actually, three messages. The first is that you're not across the literature if you don't even know what they've published about that topic. Number two is that you're publishing in the wrong journal if there's nothing in that journal that contributes to that topic that you're writing about. Or number three is it's an insult to that journal. You don't really like that journal if you don't think that anything that they've published in it is worth writing about in your own paper. So don't forget to reference the journal papers published in your own chosen journal. I've had this conversation with people and they kind of give their head a shake because they say, yeah, I guess that's an obvious one, but it's just one of these ones that you forget to double check in the end.
Shelley, thanks so much for those 10 do's and don'ts in writing an education journal paper. So let's wrap things up with some practical how-to advice.
Excellent. Thanks, Jason. So I'm going to make 4 points that are going to be rather repeated or sort of streamed together into some central themes from those 10 pieces of advice. A, take your research and your publication seriously. These are a lot of really complex ideas, I guess, or a lot of work and a lot of energy that goes into it if you're going to do a great job of that journal paper. But it's really not worth doing if it's not going to get published, right? So make sure that you take your research and your publication really seriously. B, select your journal wisely and acknowledge its impact. C, submit your paper to numerous drafts, reviews, field tests, and edits. Make sure that you draft, redraft, draft again, and send it out to those critical friends to make sure that you've got it right. And D, consider joining or forming a journal writing support group. It's really great to have the feedback of others and to buoy yourselves up. And, when the going gets tough, to have others that say, come on, keep going with it. It's kind of like meeting somebody to go to the gym with. If they're waiting on it, you're less likely to skip out.
Professor Shelley Kinash.